So we are recording. I'm going to do one of these just so my team knows where to cut it and where to edit it. And that's how fancy we are. So
I
I'll do
love
that.
low tech.
Yep, we're pretty low tech, and I'll do that, and then we'll get going. Once in a blue moon. Yep, once in a blue moon, I mess up the intro, and we'll start that over. And then perfect. I'm excited, Mike. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it, man. That's awesome. Okay, here we go. All right, welcome everybody. This is Guerrilla Health Radio. Today is Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. I am Dr. Jason Bradley, founder of Epic Functional Medicine and the developer of the Epic 5 plan and your host today. I am so excited to have one of, if not the coolest bankers on the show, Mike Finlayson. Mike is going to be talking about how health and mental health intersect with being an executive and a professional. And I just can't wait to dig into this guy's brain. When we get in there, you'll understand why. I call Mike the guru banker. And again, you guys are going to find out why here very quickly. If you do want to connect with Mike, you can find him on LinkedIn. Again, it's Mike Finlayson, Finlayson. He is with Midwest One Bank. Mike Finlayson with Midwest One Bank. And while we're at it, Midwest One has some great promotions right now on home equity loans and lines of credit. And Mike, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Dr. Jason. I've looked forward to sitting down and having a chat with you for quite some time now.
I think we've tried a couple of times, and I think when COVID hit, it became fairly unsuccessful for anybody to have any chats with anybody. So,
well, yeah, no, especially in person. And for me to venture into technologies, my wife would think I'm crazy. I can't believe I'm doing this.
Oh, I think it's great. And again, thank you for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Mike, as you know, our show format is brief. So we're going to jump right into the meat. Unlike other bankers, you have a very palpable social media presence where you post inspirational, spiritual, and even philosophical posts. Honestly, you guys should be following Mike on social media like I do. Mike, I would love to hear your story. What drives your passion to help others beyond the walls of your bank?
Well, I think a lot of it just comes from experiences. And I think, from a very early age, I was lucky to have parents that one was kind of a nerd and one was a salesperson, marketing kind of person. So I inherently got both of those genes where I'm able to dig into the details and get into the weeds, but at the same time, really have an outgoing behavior pattern. So I just love to network and love to get engaged with people. And I think over the course of time, through academics and college and all that stuff, I always stayed engaged. I had a military background. I was in college, obviously. I worked a couple different jobs. I was entrepreneurial very much in my early part of my life. And so I did a lot of volunteer work. So I was exposed to really all sectors of life and all different kinds of economic variances along that too, because I was the poor, starving kid, but trying to find a way to make my own means. So all those things culminated into my personality, and I constantly read, expanding my network, finding good mentors and people to support whatever it is I was trying to venture into at the time.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting background. I would love to hear more about your entrepreneurial spirit. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial background.
Well, I think a lot of it just starts sometimes with just basic things. You think about the kid with the lemonade stand. I was probably that kid more than anything. It's like, how can I go out and do this on myself? Now, I find it extremely fascinating, the fact that my whole career has been enveloped with working for somebody else, strangely enough. But I've manifested that and taking it so that I can help other people be successful. And so I've worked with the Tippy School of Business and their entrepreneurial program over the last number of years, just try to help other kids succeed. And I think it's kind of that teacher coach thing that I've learned to do, to take my entrepreneurial spirit and understand it and share it with everybody else. So I venture into some hobby stuff and some photography, and that's just starting to launch out now. So, and that kind of goes along lines with just trying to keep balance in life. But I think I've always been around small business people and entrepreneurs and try to find ways to successfully keep them going at the same time, kind of keep my interest going at the same time.
I was following you on social media, and I remember you had a gallery show with some of your photography. And I honestly, here I am. I know that you're, in banking and business. I know that you're an entrepreneur and work with entrepreneurs. I know that you have a passion again for philosophy and philanthropy, spirituality and practical matters as well. And then all of a sudden you're posting about your photography. What inspires you with your photography?
Well, it's funny how I've always been a little bit of an adventurer, but not really a camper or somebody like that. But I do kind of in a therapy kind of way. I like to just get in my truck and just kind of go out into nature. And with the advent of camera phones and all this stuff, I've always taken pictures, but didn't realize that I started to see an eye and seeing angles and capturing things at certain times. So it became very, very therapeutic. And so I just kind of kept doing it, accumulating pictures, finally bought a real camera, started doing some of those things. And it's just really evolved in it. I never really thought much of it more than just a hobby. But then other people are like, Mike, you got to do something with this. You really have a good eye for this stuff. And with the coaxing of my wife and some good friends, I was able to manifest this into some really remarkable prints and some great photographs over time. So it's therapeutic. It's fun. I never really expected to make money out of it, but it's always nice. I like having the funds come in as well.
I love that. Yeah. And so if people wanted to look at your photography, just while we're on it, where could people go to see your photographs?
Right now, it's still kind of in that real infantile stage as far as getting launched, but I do it through my wife's business, which is Lux Interiors here in Iowa City.
Awesome.
And so she's got prints there. She's got links to some of the prints on there. And then eventually I do have an Instagram account, which is Cool Banker Photography, and people can find it in there too. And a lot of the posts and the pictures are in there as well.
I got to write that down. The Cool Banker Photography. And that was on Instagram. Got it. Awesome. So we'll make sure that we remind our viewers about that as well. So that's fantastic. And your wife, Jan, has Lux, you said? Is that Luxe?
Yep, Lux Interiors here in Iowa City.
Nice. Yep. Fantastic. And I know that you were blessed with Jan the way I was blessed with my wife. I always call my wife my far better half in every way.
Yes.
I know that you think very highly of Jan in the same way. So,
it's important to have obviously a spouse that loves you and supports you and does all the things, but you have to reciprocate. It has to be an equal partnership. It has to be, self-sacrifice, but at the same time, you got to be there for them. And, we just have a great relationship as friends and intimate and business wise and all the things that go together with making a successful friendship and partnership.
and I think that, probably if she's anything like my wife, she's probably influenced you to have some of those spiritual, philosophical, and kind of bigger picture perspectives that are outside of the business world. I have found as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, that it's really easy to get really lost in the numbers and the business, and it's really my wife that keeps me grounded and reminds me to stay grounded and centered. So I bet that Jan's the same way.
Yeah, I think you need to, kind of always rewrite your ship, so to speak. And I think having somebody that you're very close to can help you realign those values. I've helped Jan with her business on a number of things, and she's kept me focused on some of the things that I get involved with. So it's a good balance just to kind of reset yourself sometimes and just reanalyze it.
And speaking of balance, I work with a lot of high level executives and professionals as my clients, and health, if you'll let me say that, it's a big word. Health seems to be both of the utmost importance as well as a daily struggle. And I have a question: as an executive and a professional, why is health so important to you?
Well, I think, most people want to go out there and they want to contribute and be self-sustaining. I mean, we all go to a job or we all have things that we need to do, and whether it's family, your career, those kinds of things. But at the same time, we don't take enough time to have that balance. So it's important. Your productivity and your effectiveness is directly related to how well you take care of yourself mentally and physically. If you don't have those capacities, how can you truly execute at a high level at your career? And so you have to step back. I mean, there's times where I'm like, I need a timeout. I got to take a check out. And, the bank's great. We have lots of time off, lots of holidays and stuff. So there's lots of good time to go in there and take those therapeutic checks and just go do the things that you like doing and stepping away from it. I've always found for myself is that I don't bring my family and personal life into work, and just the opposite. I don't bring my work home. You've got to find those pieces in your life where you can separate things. And I think for my mental well-being, it doesn't mean that we don't get things at home that we have to talk that are about work. And it doesn't mean that the family life doesn't intervene with your work situation, but it's really trying to make a physical line. I don't take a briefcase home. I don't, there's just stuff that you just try to walk away from each day. And I think that's important to that stress management.
I think that a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've worked with and that that are my friends, and I'm sure that you hear the same thing, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, talk about something that we collectively call pressure and noise. That there's always that pressure and noise that's just, in your head, in your head, in your head. What's your trick to shut that down? How do you set that briefcase down and come home? What's your trick?
Well, I think the big part of it is disciplining. You got to create routines and habits, positive habits. A lot of times, another thing that I kind of attribute to that is I turn off my technology. My phone stays in the car. I don't use it to wake up with. I turn off my phone every night. I don't have a computer. I turn off that stuff. And I think it's hard these days, even more so. It's a lot easier 20, 30 years ago for us to walk home and be away from work. Today, now it goes wherever you go. And I think that's the hardest part, Jason, I think, is learning how to turn off that technology and reabsorb yourself back into your personal life. So I'd say my biggest thing is just turn off the technology. You've got to find that discipline to do that every day.
I think that's great advice. And I will tell you, full disclosure here, I'm going to be transparent and vulnerable. I must have an addiction to technology for many reasons, but just the thought of turning off my phone, turning off the technology gave me a little heart palpitation. I got to be honest with you. So I know when I feel that, I know it's an area that I need to work on, so I'm going to take your advice and I don't know how I'm going to construct this yet, but I think I'm going to have a time at night where my technology gets turned off. And I don't know what that means as far as my alarm clock in the morning. But maybe I'll have to go old school, I'll have to go old school alarm clock with one of the ringy bells or something like that.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that because you talked in another podcast about, gaining more energy and getting up at the same time every day. I wake up at 6:15 every day. It's my military background or something. I just wake up. I don't have an alarm clock. I just wake up. And I've always been able to have good, sustainable energy through the day. It doesn't mean that I don't have a caffeine shot here or there, get involved with some things, but it really does. I mean, I sleep on a regular basis, go to sleep at night, but I don't have all that technology wrap up still in my head before I go to bed. And so I'm able to rest really well.
I both love technology and I have a disdain for technology. And I think a lot of people feel this way. And especially business owners, because everything is just so tech driven these days. I have this new ring that I'm wearing called an Aura ring that tracks every single vital function that you could imagine that it can track through a ring. I just got a notice this morning. This is the weirdest thing. My ring told my smartphone to tell me that I should be going to bed between 10:30 and 11:30 at night, which is actually a little bit later than I have a lights out. I usually have tech off at 9 o'clock. Lights out at 10 o'clock, but my vitals are telling me that I should, have it maybe a little bit later. So on one level, I'm really excited to explore that. On another level, I'm really excited to explore being tech free. And I'm going to have to figure out how to balance that. I think you nailed it with routine and positive habits. And I do think that the military, is a great place to develop those. My wife and I say all the time that we think that there should be mandatory conscription, into the military for most of our youths these days. God bless them all. God bless every single one of them. Tell me, how did the military influence your day to day?
Well, I was very lucky. I was in a second year of college or whatever. And I'm like, well, I was not one of these kids that was fortunate to have just a big pile of money to pay for college. So I really kind of came around it on a different way. And so it was to help subsidize my college expenses. And so I joined the military, the Air National Guard, the Air Force, and was a part of that for about 6.5 years. And I think it brought a lot of that structure. I have a structure in my personality, my behavior, mostly because of my father being a CPA accountant type person. And, so I have that genetic code. But at the same time, I'm also very adaptable and like to, make things up as we go along and have some energy and kind of less focus on things. So the military kept me that regimen, that daily functionable regimen. But then again, I still have all that other stuff out there that I kind of improvise and do things as I like to do to appease my other side of my personality. But yeah, it was the foundation. It probably saved me from failing at college and early life, just because it gave me that baseline. I committed to this thing for 6 years. It's not like I could just walk away. And I think that's the other thing we talked about today is making commitments that are long term. People bounce around and do stuff all the time. we don't make any long-term commitments, and then we don't have any plan to execute on those commitments. So the military gave me that. And so that was my baseline through most of my life. In my early part of my life. So it was like age 21 or so to I was about 28, I think, when I got out. And so, yeah, that's the baseline for, I would say, my whole existence, and being able to keep those routines and those good regimented basic daily functions.
It's super interesting, talking about long-term commitments. And I think there's a few things to unpack here. But earlier in our discussion, you mentioned that, we all want to be our best selves. That, we all want to have a good impact on the world and, leave behind a good legacy. And I think that long-term commitment to the best self is something that I think a lot of people talk about, but again, getting into the routines, getting into the habits, getting into the structure is something that people struggle with. So I've been working on something called the Best Self Schedule. I actually think that there's a planner out there called the Best Self Planner. It's totally different, unrelated, unaffiliated. I just couldn't think of a better name for it right now. So my working project is called the Best Self Schedule. And I'm going to tell you what I did. And this is my advice to folks. For my entire life, I scheduled what I needed to get done as far as here's my work hours, or when I was in school, here's my school hours, here's when I'm going to, do my homework, or here's when I'm going to work on these projects.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would try to fit in the Jason Bradley part of it. And then one day I said, what if I'm doing this completely wrong? What if what I should start with is, if I didn't have to work, what would my schedule look like just to take care of Jason Bradley so that Jason Bradley can be the most highly effective person on this planet that he can be? And I'll tell you, Mike, when I leaned into that schedule, I still had plenty of time to get my work done, plenty of time to work on business, plenty of time, for, working on balance with my family, working on all of those pieces. But when I really started working on my body, my being, my balance, instead of just focusing on business or school, man, my world changed completely. And I will say that, yeah. I mean, it's just been life changing. So hopefully I'll be sharing that a little bit more with everybody as time goes on, but it's still definitely a work in progress. I'm a work in progress. You're a work in progress. We never quite get there. But
I think you mentioned some other time, maybe it was a while ago, you faced a personal health issue. You had you were considerably heavier, bigger, maybe some weight. I went through that as well. And I got through my late 20s and into my early 30s. I was in a career field where I was just moving all the time, didn't eat well, didn't exercise. And I had ballooned up to about 225, 230 pounds. And in high school, I probably graduated high school and weighed about 185. So, I mean, this is a significant change in 10 years. And it was another demonstration of making a commitment to change my life. And so I decided to do a triathlon of all things. You're like, oh God, this guy's I didn't even know hardly swimming at all. So I was like, what am I doing here? But I recruited my resources and people that knew that stuff, started training in October in the fall, and the race was at the end of May, beginning of June. And I went from weighing about 225 to about 184 for the race time. And it was just a commitment process. But then again, I got my health back under control. But there's all kinds of things you can do to control and maintain consistent patterns of good behavior and positivity.
I totally agree. And I think that you're the same way. I mean, looking at you now, you look great. And I know that one of my personal long-term commitments is I will never go back to that heavy weight again. I will never go back to that level of ill health again. I just won't. I won't ever allow it to happen in my life. Even with an act of God, and that's not a challenge to God, but I would just not allow it to happen. And it's a commitment because it just like you, it took everything I had to dig out of that pit to get my health back. It's so much easier to maintain your health than to reclaim your health. At least that was my experience.
Yeah, and I think we're in a society today, particularly when you think of younger generations, we get everything so instantaneous, or they need this immediate gratification, and like your health or your mental health or your career or your education or whatever it is you're endeavoring at that particular moment, it takes time. It takes a development plan, it takes execution, it takes follow-up, it takes accountability. There's just so many elements that people just give up on so quickly. And in today's technology world, as you've alluded to, Jason, it's so distractive. It's a compliment and it's a distraction at the same time. And so it provides failure so quickly, and we just get distracted into something else so quickly and say, oh well, I'm not going to do that, and I'll change this,
Yep.
And, we're lacking that component of follow through and execution that is going to get those successes. And so we sometimes find people that just mire in that constant cycle of failure and don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Speaking of how to get out of it, what are the top three things that you do to stay on top? I'll give you a lot of room here to stay on top of your health. That could be your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health. What are the top three things that you do?
Well, obviously, I mean, diet and exercise are important. Of course, I'm not the guy that eats perfectly, but although I condemn or commend myself, I haven't eaten a McDonald's in over 25 years. So I don't miss any of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean I don't like a good hamburger and a good pizza. So diet and exercise are very important. I stay very regimented in going to gym. I continue to swim and stay active, hiking, biking, and all those fun things. I do read a lot. I try to read as much as I can about performance health and mental health and just keeping my mind fresh. You got to keep your mind fresh as we get older. We kind of get a little bit more lax on that. And then I think people don't recognize the other component there is that rest and that wind down component. What are you doing to manage your recovery? We all need recovery. Whether you go into a surgery, you need recovery. When you go into your daily regimented daily life, so to speak, you need recovery. And if you're not getting the balance in those things, one of them is going to sacrifice. And in the long term, the whole package kind of sacrifices. So I think that's how I do it. Is like, it's kind of like what I alluded to a little bit earlier about, not taking my work home and just like working. You've got to be able to separate those things and commit to resting and recovery and doing things that you find important, whether it's a hobby or being with your family, or like I said, it could be a church participation or group or those kinds of things. But that's kind of my small piece of mental and physical health stability.
I love that. We have our book coming out here I'm in the last few weeks. It's like I'm giving birth. I'm in the last few weeks of edits and writing, and then the publisher takes over on their end, which I can't wait. But I like that idea, of recovery. It fits perfectly into the 5 R's that we talk about, which is, remove the toxins from your life, whether they be, food toxins or chemical toxins or thought toxins or people toxins, replenish your body with nourishment, again, whether that be physical nourishment, food nourishment, people nourishment, rebuilding your tissues, rebuilding your body. And then I love that recovery. It fits perfectly in there. And then moving into a rejuvenation state. So again, without that recovery, I totally agree with you. It's one of those lost things. People always think that, hey, Mike, what do you do? And, people are like, well, I run and I eat this way and I do this. But I think what I do is recover. I give myself a break. I give myself that space and that time. I really appreciate that you said that. That's a big deal. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of ways to, as you know, Jason, you're a smart guy and you're pretty health conscious and you work with a lot of people. I mean, I think a lot of people take that recovery component or that rest period for granted. And they just think they can turn the switch on and you're going to go right back at it again. And I'm like, no, it takes a little more effort than that. You've got to disengage. I mean, really disengage. And I think that's the component a lot of people are missing, particularly with like leaving phones on and computers and, the TVs and everything that we've got going on in our lives with technology. It's like, turn it off and walk away from it. Give your brain a rest. I mean, people don't realize that when you have all that technology, your brain is just constantly going. And until you disengage from it, it doesn't know how to wind down.
And it doesn't. And it's a learning process. It's a learning curve. And like I said, I'm still getting heart palps thinking about it, but I'm going to take you up on this challenge.
Turn off your phone.
I'm going to turn off my phone. In fact, it's off right now. I turned it off when you said to do that. So I was like, I'm going to turn off my phone right now. Hey, jumping back to Mike, the guru banker. And I think people are picking up on why I refer to you in my head as this. Here's a question. Is it possible to invest in alignment with your spiritual and philosophical values these days?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think everybody needs a self-assessment of what's important to them. And then I think when you get into careers or, volunteerism, what are you passionate about? What are you good about? I kind of go back to, I'm a big advocate of strengths finders. I'm sure you're aware of what that is, but what are your passions and what are your vested interests are in your life? And then taking that energy and those resources and investing in the things that are going to find you successes. I think we spend a lot of time trying to discover other areas and then we run into failures, and failures are important, because they're great learning opportunities, but then we dwell on that too much. And so we got to kind of reset ourselves. But yeah, I think focusing on things that you have passion about, that you really care about, things that are easier for you, sometimes are the best ways to go out there and find those successes in life.
I was always told too that it's worthwhile to think about what if you're living in alignment with your spiritual and philosophical values, to think about the companies that you work with. I'm not saying that I invest in Mac, but please, nobody take my investment advice, please. I promise you. But I'm a Mac guy. I've got an Apple Watch. I've got a Mac computer. I've got an iPhone. And so I've been told, hey, if you use the products and believe in the products, that's where you should be putting at least some of your money. How do you feel about that piece of advice?
Well, I think that's in any kind of relationship. I mean, if you have value in a connection with that particular product or person or whatever it is, yeah, I mean, that should fall right in line. That means you've developed a level of trust and responsibility with that relationship, and you appreciate and respect the products or services that they're providing. Then that's totally in line with being able to go out there and invest, whether it's material dollars or volunteerism or providing consultation or advice. That's all I do. I mean, I find alignment with people that, there's some people that I work with that I don't have a clue what they do in getting into the weed stuff, which I'm not expected to know, but their approach to how they do it and the reason why they do it really makes sense to me. Like, I have a company that works on a testing cessation program with people that smoke and do alcohol. So it's supposed to help with rehab and all that kind of stuff. Well, I don't know how all the tests and stuff work and how they monitor it, but the fact that they're trying to find ways and solutions to get people off of these addictive habits is totally in line with what I would encourage people to do. So yeah, I think absolutely that all makes sense, Jason.
Cool. So speaking of trust factors, we only have a couple more questions, but I promised our listeners that I would ask this. Tesla just bought $1.5 billion in Bitcoin. So here's the question. Is crypto real? Is it here to stay? Is it still a good buy?
Yeah, I have a very close friend that I mentored, or created a friendship, but he was a mentee of mine while he was in college, and he was the crypto guy here at the University of Iowa for many years. And I stay very close to Cameron, and he's, of course, Bitcoin. And I actually, in theory, kind of on my libertarian principles of how I think of things, Bitcoin is awesome. I mean, cryptocurrency is awesome because it takes away all those fingers and threads that hold our financial system all together. Actually, I'm probably just the opposite guy that should work at a bank when you think of philosophically, because banking to me and the structural components that kind of hold it together and control it drives me nuts. So there's so much regulatory component to it, and so many things that inhibit growth of individual currencies and other ways to exchange monies, or however you want to put it. It's a real deal. I mean, I don't know, at some point, I'm very cautious when I think of economics, and, the government continues to spend billions and billions and trillions of dollars that they really don't have, or we're writing them on a credit card, so to speak. When does that implode?
The largest credit card ever used, I believe, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so when does it implode, or when is the next depression or economic world chaos because of all these, the government's leveraging so much there? It's a huge concern. I mean, when the government spends money, they're basically printing money. It just devalues the money that's already out there. People don't understand sometimes that, and that's what inflation is. And so if you go and print $1.9 trillion, which they're trying to push through on this next relief package, that just devalues the dollar that's in your pocket.
Right.
And so that loaf of bread that used to cost $1 now costs $1.25. And so people don't understand the economic complicity of how all that happens. And so cryptocurrency gets away from that to a point, because it can't be touched by a federal government. It's all run by the people that are participating in it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's real. It's not, I mean, 1.5 billion by Tesla. I mean, that's no joke. I don't personally have any cryptocurrency, not because I'm prohibited, because I'm a banker, but I do realize at some point down the road, my job's going to be obsolete. Bankers will be obsolete to the point where if cryptocurrency takes off and you have all these various currencies, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever, it's going to make banking industry irrelevant.
It's
So I worry about my career.
you know what, we're technology. I think we're all worried about our careers, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think down the road, the podcast, there'll be an AI that can do better questions than I can come up with, So,
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
and then even from a doctoring point of view, Rachel and I are working on software that basically can take a large amount of data from different lab and lifestyle parameters and put it together into what's the best plan for somebody. I mean, I'm literally creating the software that will make my job and doctors' jobs obsolete. And I hope to God that we can figure out that software, because how cool would that be? I mean,
Yeah.
stick your finger in somewhere, get a blood drop, the computer analyzes it, tells you exactly what's going on, exactly what to do. I mean, that's a pretty cool vision for the future. Although there's a little hint of idiocracy in there as well.
Well, it's funny. I'm very futuristic, but I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Gattaca, but it's kind
Oh
of
yeah,
that, yeah, it's like that perfect being, so to speak. And they do the testing to make sure
yeah.
that genetically and stuff. So there's some of that that's always kind of fearful in my mind of,
It's that dystopian.
we put my
Yeah,
finger in a socket and it draws blood and tells me I'm going to have cancer in 3 years. Do I want to know that?
right.
You know what I mean?
I hear you. I think there's some dystopia. I will say though, with that particular scenario, though, I think finding out sooner than later is always good for lots of reasons, because I mean, it gives us time to take action, and I
Right.
mean, I'd rather find out that my chances are high. I mean, I don't want to find this out, Mike. I don't want you to find this out, but I'd rather be in the position to say, hey, you know what? It looks like in 10 years, this might develop unless we make these changes, right?
Right.
Here are some things that we can do now to lower that risk. And I think that that's really where medicine is going, is risk management and risk mitigation. I don't think we talk enough about it. I think that COVID had an opportunity to bring that out. Unfortunately, it has not gotten a lot of lip service, but I mean, as we know, the average person that is unfortunately succumbing to COVID has 2.4 chronic diseases that they're suffering
Right.
from.
Right.
According to every health agency in the world, 80 to 90+% of chronic health disorders can be prevented and even reversed. So again, I think COVID had an opportunity to have a discussion about that publicly, but we're not even allowed to publicly talk openly about that being overweight is unhealthy. We have a lot of unfortunately, a lot of gag orders on topics that are very serious in our
Well, and
population.
that's where I'm totally in agreement with you, Jason, and your ideas, of being proactive and preventative, and that's kind of always done my life. I mean, last thing I want to be is in a hospital.
Yeah,
I just do everything in my life that I can to avoid ever going to a hospital or having to see a doctor. Not because of an illness, but I just don't want to end up there. Maybe I
right.
have a phobia about hospitals or something beyond that. But really, everything I do is to try to avoid ever being in that situation. I don't
And I,
smoke. I don't do drugs. I don't abuse alcohol. I try to keep my weight in line. I stay extra. I do all those preventative things to avoid having to be in that situation. So, like when COVID comes along, as it rears its ugly head of what it's done to our society and to our global society, is that we've neglected things for so long.
yeah,
And now you got to reverse that trend. And how are you going to do it? Well, we'll make a vaccine. It'll make you better. That's actually the worst thing that could have happened, in my opinion, because it just continues to enable the poor decisions that we're making.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And I
go
think we've
ahead.
been promised. I was going to say, I think we've been promised, to quote Dr. Fred Barge, a pill to sleep, a pill to wake, a pill for every body ache. And with no personal responsibility, obviously, is what
Right.
Dr. Barge was talking about. And I think that it's just an unfortunate commentary, on where we are as both a U.S. society. I mean, one of the sickest societies on the planet. 5% of the world's population consuming 80 to 85% of the world's pharmaceuticals, and yet one of the sickest, and not one of, we are the sickest, quote, Western industrialized modern countries on the planet. And again, it's because personal responsibility has been thrown out the window. Mike, we have time, just enough time to leave our listeners with any parting words of advice.
I think somebody, and of course, Jason, we've talked many times about things, but having that, I mean, in that philosophical way, are you thinking strategically? Are you critically thinking? Do you have balance in your life? Are you being prepared for things that could be challenges or adversity, rather than being blindsided and then just being stuck and just not knowing what to do? Are you doing things in your daily life, in your daily regimen, that helps you prepare yourself for adversity and challenge? I think a lot of people just pretend that's not going to happen. It's inevitable. And so I'd say spend time thinking about your family, your close friends, your career, those things that how you can, when adversity happens, and it's going to happen, how are you going to navigate that? What is your plan of taking on that challenge and be able to work through it? Because so many people give up. They're like, oh, well, I'll just, do this or do that, and then it'll go away. Well, a lot of times it doesn't go away. And how are you going to manage it? So I'd say kind of overall and a kind of big picture thing is, being a little bit more prepared,
I
think
love
a
it.
little bit more strategically, and, don't think in the moment right now, because, with tech, it puts us in that behavioral pattern of right now, and it doesn't have any strategic capacity to it. So you gotta step away. And I hate to beat up, electronics and technology so much, but it also is inherently really a bad habit. And so how are you going to manage a habit?
I
And
love it.
part
I
of that is stepping away from it and thinking a little bit more strategically.
I think that's all very good advice. And I love the fact that you said, we need to be a little bit more prepared. I just wrote down the words be prepared, right, when you said that. And I was going to make a reference to my old Eagle Scout days, to be prepared. And I love that. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. Let me just remind people how to get a hold of you. Go to Instagram, The Cool Banker Photography. You can visit Lux Interiors in Iowa City and Mike's lovely wife, Jan. Mike Finlayson on LinkedIn and also at Midwest One Bank. The coolest banker you'll ever meet, and also the guru banker for many reasons. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a great time, and I really appreciate the time that you gave us.
Thanks, Jason. Look forward to connecting with you soon again.
You bet. And it will be soon. And you know what, guys, until next time, I want you guys to stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.